Salutations and fist bumps, folks. Welcome back to the Blur Grid. Today we're going to talk about the differences between Gorr in the MCU and Gorr in the comics. Gorr in the MCU is a little bit different than Gorr in the comics. Gorr in the MCU is a nice paintable picture, but it's not necessarily the same comic book character that you would know and love if you are an avid comic book reader. An avid comic book reader would easily understand that there are some similarities and some differences in between the two versions of Gorr. And we're going to talk about the similarities first, and then we're going to talk about the differences after. But I wanted to first say that both characters have their places in the in the Marvel universe. It's just that the cinematic version is a little bit different than the comic. So let's first start off with the similarity. The first one is the loss of a family member, which we see inside of the Thor and Love and Thunder movie, but also in the comics, the same exact thing happens to Gorr as well. It's just a little bit different, but to expand on what happens in the MCU movie, he only loses his daughter. So basically, literally everything that he does is stemmed from the fact that he loses. Literally the reason why he goes after the gods in the first place is because he loses his family. And in the beginning of the Thor Love and Thunder movie, he actually denounces the gods, or denounces a god that he comes in contact with, then getting the Necro Sword from there. And to speak about the Necro Sword, that's also a similarity that we need to talk about here, because in Thor Love and Thunder, in the MCU, and in the comics, Gorr gets the Necro Sword in both situations. How he gets it is a little bit different, but he gets it nonetheless. And what he does is literally go about butchering every single god that he comes across, whether it's Hercules or anyone else. He tries to kill, well, Hercules and Thor, specifically Thor, but he literally tries to take out everybody or every god that he comes across in both the MCU and in the comics as well. So that's, again, a similarity that we can kind of bridge here. So now that and obviously the last similarity that we can talk about is the color that in the MCU, he has the same color, and in the comics, he also has a similar color. It's a little off though, but it's a similar color that he has both in comics and in the MCU. Now, I want to talk about the differences, and the differences are pretty widespread, and we can kind of talk about those pretty extensively. But the differences between Gorr in the comics and Gorr in the MCU is one of the first differences that you can see is how he actually gets the Necro Sword. So in the comics, Gorr actually gets the Necro Sword from the first symbiote All Black, who actually comes or has an altercation with another symbiote. And so the way that Gorr gets the Necro Sword is actually from a interaction with the symbiote, or the first symbiote, All Black, who is a bad and nasty creature if you've ever read the comics. And my son is also agreeing with me. But he is bad news all throughout, and he then embodies Gorr, or fuses with Gorr, and becomes the Necro Sword because of his mind. Not necessarily was it there before. So in the MCU, or in the movie, in the Thor Love and Thunder movie, we see this black thing or black object give him a sword that is pretty much already formed. But in the comics, he forms it from his mind, and literally whatever else he wants as well. So the symbiote, just like we would see with Venom, becomes whatever the host actually wants them to become. So Gorr then can use the same symbiote, All Black, to become a sword, a shield, body armor, whatever he wants in the comics. And he's way more lethal than he was portrayed inside of the movie. He's also a little bit more scarier in terms of appearance than he was portrayed inside of the movie as well. Although the movie still did some justice to his actual physical appearance, but it's not necessarily who Gorr is through and through. And the way that we get to the reason why he hates the god so much is because he actually loses his entire family. Mom, dad, sister, brother, wife, kids, everything. That's the reason, and that's the biggest thing that we don't see inside the movie or inside the MCU character version, that we don't see that arc at all, really, except for the fact that he loses his daughter. And in the movie, he doesn't really lose her because he gets to eternity and actually brings her back. He dies, but she actually gets to live. So that's also a slight difference between the two characters or how they would be portrayed as well. These are the differences that I saw. So these are the differences that I saw in the MCU version of the character and the comic version of the character. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Do you think that the MCU version is better than the comic version? Do you think the comic version is better than the MCU version? Let me know. And also, while you're at it, go ahead and hit that like button if you like this type of content, so this can spread to way more people and we can keep this discussion going. And until the next video, blurred out.